Will we start the second hour? The Oregon Ducks. The old Peacock Network. Not a great display for them this weekend. Turns out when they don't have NFL or Olympics, they don't care as much or something. Because
dear God, that was bad.
That was really bad.
Yeah.
It wasn't broadcaster problem. It was quality.
I'm going to criticize the broadcasters a little bit, too.
Really? Michael Robinson and Andrew Siciliano.
Yeah, he was screwing up the score. He said at the end of the third quarter it was 27-0.
Can I defend him quickly to interrupt you?
Fire away.
I think those guys, what I've learned in watching their booth hits, I think they watch TV. I don't think they're actually watching the field and the Jumbotron. I think they're looking at their own TVs.
There's a lot of that for sure in broadcasting.
And I think that's what happened because their score bug got screwed up.
You should to say the score at one point is 27-0 when that's clearly not the case. I know that I'm a little nitpicky here, but I think it was everything together. That was one of the worst Oregon broadcasts that I have ever seen.
And so many in the state of Oregon so far have not watched the Ducks play because Comcast didn't have the Big Ten Network, and some don't have the Peacock Network.
No.
But they escaped Boise 37-34. This was a wild, unpredictable ride through that whole journey. If you looked at box score stuff, I don't think it would accurately tell you what the game was. I think it was like it's like a musical fest. You had to be there, man.
You had to know.
Yeah, you had to be at Woodstock. You know, you can watch the documentary, but you had to be there. That's kind of what it felt like to watch or probably be at Autzen. J&T lived up to the billing, 192 yards on the ground.
God, he is so good, man.
Wow, he was an NFL guy.
He's an absolute monster.
He was really stinking good. Jordan James got the bulk of the carries. They changed that from week one. We talked about that coincidentally on Friday. I was like, Jordan James is the better back. He should be the premier back. Oregon escaping Boise State. How are you doing on Monday?
Undefeated, buddy. 2-0, man. I don't have nothing to talk about here. 2-0. I think they're the first team in the history of college football that keeps winning and dropping in the polls, so I can't wait for that potentially to happen again this weekend. Eke out a win by 3 against Oregon State, and they fall to number 12 or 13.
Somebody was demanding the dirty poll after Saturday night's game.
I'll tell you what, they're not going to be in the top 10, man. This is not a serious football team right now. There were a lot of things that you wanted to see cleaned up from week 1 to week 2. And almost all of them were not cleaned up from week 1 to week 2. The offensive line is still a glaring issue. That did not go away. And the other big thing from week 1 was the penalties and shooting yourself in the foot. And they said, you thought 8 penalties was a lot. Hold my beer. Let's go for 9. And those are the only accepted penalties.
Ones, yeah.
And then added an extra turnover on top. They only had 1 turnover last week. They said, hey, 1 turnover. We'll go for 2 this week. And they had 2 turnovers this week, both of them in critical moments. I have never seen a stupider football game in my entire life. That game made no sense. Every time something good would happen for Oregon, and you would have the thought of maybe they're kind of finding a little bit of form here. Maybe this is the momentum turner they needed. They would follow it up by quite literally doing the stupidest thing humanly possible. They got off to a horrible start, 3 and out. You're down 3-0. Okay, you find yourself up 14-10. All of it, you're in the lead. First half, offense has a couple explosive plays. Here we go. 14-10. You force a 3 and out from Boise State. You got the lead. All right, momentum on our side. 14-10. Oregon then had a 3 and out in which they lost 24 yards and punted on 4th and 34. They had a 4th and 34 that they had to punt on. So way to seize momentum there. You fast forward to the second half. After a horrendous first half, you have dominated the second half defensively. Boise State came out to start the second half, 6 plays and punt, only gained 29 yards, 3 and out.
That third quarter was dominant.
That was the start of their second half.
Yeah.
Oregon's defense was controlling the game. You turned a 6-point deficit into a 7-point lead that should have been an 8-point lead, but you missed a PAT, but I digress. It's 27-20, fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
You have the ball on Boise State's 30-yard line going in to take a 2-score lead. What did Boise State largely struggle to do offensively in that game? Throw the football. You're going to turn them into a pass-happy offense. That leans right into the strength of your defense. J&T's kind of out of the mix at that point because they're going to have to throw their way back into it. And instead of finishing that and going up by 10 or 14, you proceed to fumble, give up a touchdown on the next play, and then fumble 2 plays later, and then give up a touchdown 4 plays later.
Now
and you said, how about instead of going up 14, we're down by 7 with 8 minutes or whatever it was to go in the fourth quarter. That was one of the stupidest games I've ever seen. They tried actively to lose it and multiple times, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around how they did not lose that game.
Yeah. That's a very good
Special
recap
teams.
by you.
Special teams is how they didn't lose it. I know the answer, but still, that's like how is that possible?
Well, I've thought this for a while, and I thought it even more watching this game Saturday night. Oregon, no matter who is on the team, I'd go back to Chip Kelly probably for my brain. I would never kick to any player ever at the University of Oregon, and I just don't. And Boise was largely avoiding this, and then the one punt they gave Tez, what happened?
Yeah.
He gone. And then they kick it to Noah Whittington instead of kicking it in the back of the end zone. What happened? Touchdown. Like, without those, Boise wins.
Yep.
And I want to ask you this. We are in a hot take business, scorching hot take for some. Where are you at on Dan Lanning?
I haven't changed on Dan Lanning at all.
None of the start to this season has changed anything for you about Dan Lanning?
No, it hasn't, because I think you have to look at the bigger picture and not in the moment. And the bigger picture is he has elevated your recruiting profile and upped the level of talent on this roster, which I still believe that they have, an incredible amount of talent on this roster. And that's not going to change because of one bad week or 2 bad weeks or one bad loss or 2 bad losses, which might be looming in the near future for you. This team, I think it all boils down to a fundamental flaw that they have. And that fundamental flaw is their offensive line is incredibly banged up, and without certain guys in the lineup, they suck. Like, Charlie Pickard playing is a break glass in case of emergency situation, and you've had to start him at center in back-to-back games. His calls and checks are horrible. That keeps you from running the football efficiently. He's hiking the ball to Dylan Gabriel when he's not expecting it. That leads to a turnover and a fumble. Like, that is where the fundamental flaw of this team is. It starts up front. And if they don't fix that, this is going to be a bad football team this year. But I don't throw out what he's done for 2 years in the direction the program's going, because they have injuries there and they haven't been able to figure it out on the offensive line.
The only counter to what you said there, because you're not wrong, and we got offensive line reaction audio from Dan, who I text this to you guys. I watched his post game. I watched his on field post game. I think you could see it in the game. He has the look of a guy who is being caught off guard that his team is this.
Yeah.
Because he was doing a lot of chest puffing, kind of off-season stuff, building a lot of momentum for him in the program. And I hear what you're saying about the offense. It's also been Idaho, Boise State that they're having problems with on the offensive line.
Yeah, not good.
So I don't know, and maybe they'll prove us wrong with Bedford's return. I don't know if excusing an injury or two on the offensive line. Boise State gave up a ton of points to Georgia Southern last week. Idaho is Idaho. This is a team that came in with preseason national championship kind of thought or opinion from some, if not Big Ten title worthy. And so far, it's been like squeak by Idaho and barely get past Boise State.
Hasn't looked good at all.
And so that's why I asked you, like, the Dan Lanning. Not that you.
Well, I think that's the question. Like, where am I at on Dan Lanning? You want me to fire him?
No,
like,
no.
What's the thought? Am I out on him as a coach?
Well, it's a little. It's got to be just. I'm not expecting you to say you're firing Dan Lanning to be ridiculous, and I'm not even saying he is a bad coach. I'm just like, this season so far, and it's weird because you're right. They're 2-0. They're falling in the polls, but there's not been the team that we thought we would see. No. I think Dylan Gabriel's numbers are a lie. Numbers never lie, they say. I've watched it. It looks weird. It looks different with him.
He's holding on to the football. He's taking bad sacks. He's not reading the pressures that defenses are bringing.
And that's the thing is that's one difference between him and Bo. And Lanning actually said this in the postgame. I was a little surprised. He's like, hold on to the ball too long. Well, that first sacks that they got.
First drive of the game, second play of the game. It was a cover zero blitz, all-out blitz.
Didn't
you
see him
can't
at all.
block all the guys coming, and he just stood there in the pocket and held it.
Here was Dan Lanning. He had a back and forth with the Oregonians reporter on the offensive line shuffling.
Even if you're sorting out some of the O-line rotation, Dan, as you mentioned, are 4 different lineups and 11 changes and 57 plays too much? Was that by design? And does this uncertainty give you pause or raise questions about in the offseason about the spring, about mixing and matching personnel as much as you guys did?
Well, I think if you're mixing and matching today, that's probably a good reason to make sure you mix and match in the spring. But, I mean, how long did it take you to do all that math? Just keep track. Good. I'm glad you figured it out. We're going to figure out who the best is. Keep working it.
Like a 24-second question and a 7-second answer.
That's a lot of math, a lot of combination. I wasn't counting all of them, but every time there was a different O-line combination in, I was the Leo movie pointing at the screen. That's a new center, new guard.
Well, here he is. He had more on the O-line on the rotation of his offensive line.
We'll watch the film and see, right? Again, I always talk about if you're good enough, you're old enough. Ever since I've been here, we've rotated on the offensive line when we had players that were able to do that. JPJ was rotating early on, his first year. Last year we had, Poncho rotating in. So that's not uncommon for us to get, the best guys in the lineup and keep guys fresh. So we'll watch the film, evaluate it, and figure out, our best 5 or 6 or 7, whoever that might be that can play winning football for us.
Will they get their best 5? They have the Civil War this weekend at Oregon State. They beat Boise State this weekend 37-34.